You won't believe the tea we're about to spill. From hidden breakups to jaw-dropping lies, this is Reality Recap. Make sure to hit that subscribe button before the chaos unfolds. Welcome, everyone. One unexpected knock, a single envelope, and just like that, Kody Brown's entire empire came crumbling down. Decades of loyalty, sacrifice, and fragile loyalties detonated in an instant. And the searing Arizona sun that color-coded the Flagstaff sky red. Kody gripped a pile of documents, page after page more incriminating than the last. His fingers were not trembling because of the cold around him, but with the astounding weight of betrayal. And this betrayal was not from the media or ex-wives. It was from within his own home. Aurora Brown, Robyn's daughter, the child he promised to defend like his own, was suing him. Theft of property, mismanagement. It wasn't a miscommunication. It was an organized ambush by the law. The news burst out on the internet, shook TLC's production team to its foundations, and tore the Brown family apart in ways no one could have anticipated. You figured Kody's ruin would be spurred by Christine's departure, or Janelle's devastation over Garrison. But no, the greatest wound was inflicted by the hand he trusted most. What actually went down during that property sale? What did Robyn know? And what did she keep from Kody? And why is Aurora, the woman he once referred to as daughter, at the forefront of his destruction? Stay right here, because what started as a sister-wives fantasy is careening into a full-fledged national scandal. We're talking forged signatures, secret emails, missing money, going viral on TikToks, and a last confession so raw, TLC wouldn't even air it unedited. This isn't family drama. It's the explosion of a reality TV dynasty. The betrayal had started. Kody Brown stood in his foyer, a room once filled with laughter and children running barefoot. It was now sterile. The quiet was deafening. Robyn stood behind him, looking at her phone as Aurora's name glowed once more. But she couldn't respond. It wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore. It was about what the lawsuit represented. Years of devotion, public shaming, and hard work condensed into court papers and chilly legal jargon. The same girl whose school fees he covered, whose panic attacks he accompanied her through, whose trolls he dealt with, was now in a courtroom, ticking off each of his shortcomings. Worse still, her attorneys possessed Robyn's outdated email, one she had sent to Kody and Aurora years prior, outlining a suggested ownership transfer. In it, Robyn had nonchalantly made the suggestion of putting the Flagstaff property in Aurora's name for tax reasons. Overwhelmed at the time by his fight with Christine and Janelle, Kody had signed off blindly, and now that email was an arsenal. Kody had inadvertently waived his rights, and Aurora's attorneys were taking that very action to plead monetary negligence, particularly because he attempted to reclaim the property afterward when tensions ran high in the family. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #OravsKody, #RobynKnew, and #SisterWivesScandal 2022 took over every platform. TikTok creators reenacted the scenes. Legal analysts gave breakdowns. TLC issued a neutral statement that only fueled the fire. Christine and Janelle, sitting silently in the bleachers, phones buzzing nonstop. In the Utah kitchen, sipping coffee, Christine whispered into her phone, "I knew it. I knew something like that would happen." Janelle wasn't shocked either. That man never saw betrayal coming. Unless Christine's name was attached to it, he never thought it would be from her daughter. Kody sat in his den back in Flagstaff, fingers deep in his hair. He wasn't only losing a court case. He was facing the humiliation of being rejected by the daughter he never officially adopted but always felt deep down as his own. And what about Robyn? She was coming apart. Tears streamed down her face as Aurora remained steadfast in the chilly, clinical mediation room. Papers covered the table, all of them scars, memories brought back to the surface. He sat across from her, folded arms, jaw clenched. But the woman before him was a stranger, and no longer the little girl who asked for bedtime stories, no longer the wide-eyed kid he used to shield. This was someone else now, someone who had grown up in the shadows of silence, years of shattered illusions, someone who had seen her mother cry behind closed doors. The attorney's words were clipped, their voice cutting like knives. "Do we want punitive damages?" someone asked. The words hung suspended in the air, thick as smoke. Aurora's voice did not shake, though her heart pounded in her chest. "Yes," she answered. "Not for money. But so he'll know what helplessness is like." Once, Robyn sat in the hallway outside, fists knotted so hard they had drained the color from her knuckles. She could hear muffled voices within, and the hot shame searing in her chest. Her daughter's suffering had ever been genuine. Robyn had understood that. But this public display of it in a courtroom? This had never been the vision. Along the way, somehow, she had lost both Kody and Aurora to the same tempest. In the meantime, the word of the lawsuit went viral. The tabloids were obsessed. Sister Wives Civil War. Kody sued by daughter. Headlines ran rampant on every entertainment network. Devoted fans flooded forums and social media, torn between anger and sympathy. Reddit threads spread like wildfire, analyzing past episodes for hints. Remember in season 17 when Aurora cried off camera and Kody dismissed it? A user wrote, "IT was always present. We just didn't want to acknowledge it."
Until now.
Within weeks, journalists were excluded from attending, but tension couldn't be concealed. Kody occupied the defendant's table, surrounded by lawyers, but totally isolated.
No wives.
No kids. Nothing but empty silence. To his right, Aurora occupied a seat with her attorneys, still staring at him. Into evidence was filed a picture of her, 13 years old, not physically bruised, but unmistakably broken.
The courtroom gasped.
The judge sat unmoving, expressionless, as the testimonies continued to pour in. Other voices emerged. Dayton, ordinarily soft-spoken and reserved, filed a sealed statement. "I saw my sister vanish," he wrote. He didn't punch her, but he erased her. That one sentence split the courtroom apart like a fault line. Robyn, though not specifically named in the lawsuit, was devastated. Friends said she'd ceased all filming for TLC. She canceled all interviews. Her presence disappeared from social media. The image carefully guarded by the public persona she created fell apart under the pressure of Aurora's reality. And then, suddenly, the moment no one saw coming. Christine Brown came in from Utah and appeared at the hearing. She sat quietly in the rear, directly behind Aurora, and nodded once softly when Aurora looked over at her. It was an understated thing, but it said more than anything else uttered in court. Later, she explained to People magazine, "We always knew something was off. We were just too broken at the time to deal with it." And then came the verdict. The judge held Kody liable for emotional neglect. The damages? A token $1. But the effect? Gigantic. Kody Brown, the stern head of a vast polygamist clan, was now legally culpable of emotionally harming his own daughter. Just outside the courthouse, in the parking lot, Aurora came forward and spoke to the cameras for the first time. Her voice did not tremble. "This isn't revenge," she declared. "It's recognition. And I hope it gives other daughters the strength to speak up." Kody, on the other hand, sneaked out the rear door by himself. He got into his SUV, nobody accompanying him, not even Robyn. And the burden of that dollar verdict weighed heavily next to him, as a shadow. Over the next few days, the Brown family broke apart even more, bifurcated by silence. But it wasn't only the verdict that shook the ground. It was what it represented. It was the wreckage of everything Kody had attempted to construct. TLC, longtime chronicler of their complex universe, issued a mysterious statement. "We respect the privacy of all family members during this time and will be reevaluating future programming." Translation? The cameras were likely shutting off for good. The day after the trial, Meri posted an Instagram story. Just a black screen with one sentence. "Truth always finds its voice, even in whispers." Fans immediately began decoding. Some saw it as support for Aurora. Others thought it was Meri's final goodbye to a show that had consumed over 10 years of her life. Then, Janelle, stable, earthy Janelle, piped up at last with a brief video. She stood in her garden and was direct. "Families are messy. Ours more than most. But I still believe in healing, even when it begins with the deepest scars." She didn't mention names. She didn't need to. Her eyes spoke volumes. While Robyn was also out of public sight. The house that was once employed for filmed family dinners and cringeworthy confessionals was now shrouded behind privacy screens. Only food delivery drivers regularly visited. Dayton was seen exiting the residence with bags, apparently relocating to a college friend's place in Flagstaff. IT wasn't just psychological anymore. The breakup was physical. And Kody? He disappeared. No comment.
No apology.
No sit-down exclusive on Entertainment Tonight. Just poof. The man who was once at the center of polygamy on television had become a ghost. A malfunction in his own narrative. Rumors flew quick. Some said he was in hiding with distant relatives in Montana. Others said he'd gone into therapy to deal with what he'd done, but it did not matter. The harm was done. Each headline, each rumor, each tweet carried his name like a wound. But in the end, it was the next generation who made the most surprising ripples. Aurora's defiant stand set afire. Her half-sisters started posting their own messages, subtle, but not to be ignored. One posted a childhood picture, with the quote, "Behind every smile, there's a story untold." Another shared a black-and-white video of herself singing a haunting rendition of Radiohead's Creep. Comment streams overflowed. Hashtags such as #BrownDaughtersSpeak and #SisterWivesAreSilentNoMore began trending. TLC moderators moved to contain the deluge. Old-time fans came back by the truckload, not to fate the show, but to tear down. They pored over every shot, every moment, now interpreting it through a considerably bleaker filter. A show that was initially offered as a daring experiment in faith and plural love had morphed into something quite another thing, a study in emotional trauma, denial, and favoritism. Christine, the ever-quiet warrior, took initiative. She started working on an unofficial support network for adult children of polygamous families. "It's not about destroying families," she said to the Salt Lake Tribune. "It's about asking, what was the actual cost of this system we maintained for so many years?" And the cost was high. Not in terms of dollars, but in years spent, identities broken, and voices silenced. During the days following the verdict, the Brown family did not collapse in argument and raging battles. They crumbled in silence. The quiet that develops between folks who once celebrated holidays, shared secrets, and a surname. Kody? He was visible, yes, but hardly recognizable. The bravado was nowhere to be found. Those fiery TLC diatribes about faith and fatherhood? Nowhere to be heard. No interviews, no tweets, no media spots. He seemed to just withdraw from sight, and that quiet only fueled the rumor-mongering. Janelle, a pragmatist to the core, eventually spoke up in a sit-down with Good Morning America. Her tone was even, but firm. Kody's abuse didn't start and stop with Aurora. She acknowledged, "Some of us, we just learned how to conceal the bruises. The emotional ones," she paused, then added softly, "maybe we stayed quiet because we didn't want everything to fall apart. But it's fallen now, hasn't it?" Behind closed doors, TLC producers scrambled to take back control. Emergency meetings were held. Could Sister Wives survive without the core family? Trial coverage had caused a ratings spike, but executives worried the story had shifted beyond TV into something too tragic to touch. Nevertheless, they proceeded with a special, Sister Wives, The Reckoning. Christine, Janelle, even Meri consented to appear. Kody did not. Robyn remained faithful to her promise. She didn't appear. 2 weeks later, the special was shown. It began with one shot, a lone shot of Aurora, sitting alone in the same mediation room. She looked directly into the camera. "What you saw wasn't love," she declared. "It was control masquerading as family values. And it took me 20 years to see that finally." The special ran 3 agonizing hours, filled with never-before-seen footage, unreleased interviews, and confessionals that had been cut from final cuts. Fans saw Kody yelling at his children behind closed doors, belittling their feelings, and swatting aside his wives' worries like cobwebs. Public opinion shifted overnight. A former fan favorite, Kody was now universally reviled. Internet boycotts caught fire quickly. Petitions demanded his ouster from any new TLC programming. Loyalists started tweeting hashtags such as #JusticeForAurora and #KodyOut. Merchandise that once toasted the Brown family's special love disappeared from shelves. Book deals, podcast offers, endorsements, they all evaporated. But during the turmoil, Meri did something nobody anticipated. She connected with Aurora. In a handwritten letter later printed by The Atlantic, she wrote, "I was quiet when you wanted me to be loud. I apologize. And if you'll permit me, I'd like to be a part of your recovery." Aurora never answered in public. But according to close sources, she drafted the letter and has it displayed on her writing desk to this day. And that wasn't the end either. Weeks following the verdict, Dayton, the soft background presence always hovering in the edges of Brown family drama, finally emerged. In his initial live television interview, across from a stoic Anderson Cooper, Dayton did not hold back. "When love in a home is conditional, He declared, "Silence becomes how you survive." We weren't a family. We were the audience for Kody's show. The interview went viral. Clips were picked apart by mental health experts, referenced in think pieces, and even taught in university sociology courses. Dayton did not shed tears. But millions watching at home did. And Robyn? She was more or less a ghost in Flagstaff. Her house in the gated community was locked away from the world. Neighbors reported food delivery sitting untouched for days. One neighbor reported seeing her at dawn, barefoot, standing on her porch, looking out into the desert, almost as though waiting for something or someone to come back. And perhaps she was, for once love's broken like that. It very seldom goes back together in the same way. Once the television gold. The Brown family had represented alternative family values adopted by mainstream America. Now, they were a warning, a slow-motion breakdown watched by millions die in the silence after the verdict. The Browns were not a family, but isolated stars, each burning alone, too distant to create a constellation. TLC cameras, once ushered into almost every corner of their existence, were now locked out. Doors that once opened wide were closed. The couch interviews were over. No longer could they have game night. Just unanswered texts and voicemail messages left lingering into emptiness. Janelle followed the trial from a distance. She hadn't testified. Aurora hadn't even asked. But every headline in the newspaper was like another burden on her chest. That night, she phoned Christine softly. "You did the right thing," she said to her. Christine's voice broke. "We should have spoken up a long time ago." Robyn slipped into a silence at the very same time, one so absolute that it frightened even her very closest friends. She stopped taking calls. The blinds on her Flagstaff house remained closed. Her once-lived social media accounts fell silent. Her final post, the week before the verdict, was of a sunset photo, filtered to perfection, with the caption, "Even shadows can't exist without light." People attempted to read between the lines, but no one knew for certain where Robyn's heart lay. Did she have a clue that this was going to go down? Did she attempt to prevent it from happening? Or did she hold on to Kody so tight she pushed everyone else away? Within TLC, damage control was in full swing. Contracts were on the line. Sponsors were withdrawing. A spin-off series spotlighting Robyn and her kids was indefinitely put on the back burner. One of the producers, talking anonymously to Variety, admitted, "The family fell apart faster than we could adjust our cameras." Network execs behind the scenes wrestled with whether the Brown franchise could be salvaged, or if it was time to bring it to a total conclusion. And meanwhile, in Utah, Aurora was being treated to a weekend at the home of Christine and David Woolley. Pictures emerged of the two women laughing together in the kitchen, preparing meals together, strolling under snow-dusted trees. But there was a weariness behind Aurora's smile that no fresh air could remedy. Because trauma doesn't stop at the court verdict, it just takes up residence elsewhere. Kody, meanwhile, was rumored to be considering an exit from Flagstaff. With no wives, no children nearby, and no show remaining to host, there wasn't much to stick around for. A friend close to Kody told Us Weekly he really believed he could manage the story indefinitely. But nowadays, the narrative wrote itself. Weeks later, Kody was spotted at a rural Arizona diner, dining solo. A waitress remembered. He stared exhausted, gaunt. "Like a person I hardly knew." She offered to get him anything else. He just shook his head and whispered, "I've lost everything I can lose." But drama didn't end in that courtroom. The podcast Sister Wives, unscripted, put out a special series called The Aurora Tapes. Throughout 5 episodes, they dissected Aurora's story with interviews from therapists, trauma specialists, and even former production staff. In one episode, a cameraman retired who told, "We were told not to record certain scenes, particularly when children were crying. They didn't want it to become too dirty." Indignation erupted. Fans started petitions to pressure TLC to release the secret footage. #Justice for Aurora trended on X for 2 consecutive days. What had once been entertainment, reality TV escapism, had evolved into an appeal for moral judgment. And then there was the twist that nobody anticipated. Meri Brown, the original wife, and the one who had emotionally strayed farthest from the family, posted a 10-minute video message on Instagram. She sat by herself in a plainly furnished room, looking directly at the camera with uncommon candor. "I don't know where to start," she confessed, "but I do know where I messed up. I kept quiet when I should have spoken. I smiled for the cameras, even when actual pain was occurring just outside their range. And to Aurora, I'm sorry." The video went viral. It was reposted by feminist activists, parenting advocates, and even daytime talk shows. The message was clear and cutting. Silence equals complicity. Kody never issued a public response. But according to insiders, the video hit hard. He watched it 3 times, a source revealed. Didn't say a word. Just sat there to be wise. Summer. The Brown name had changed. No longer was it equated with plural love. It now stood for something more nuanced. Pain, truth, healing, and responsibility. TLC did not make a formal announcement regarding the future of the show, but sources indicated a short-form docuseries in the works, not about the family themselves, but about trauma and its representation on reality television. And Aurora? She proceeded, quietly, steadily, and on her own terms. She started going to therapy full-time and took college courses online. One fan reported seeing her in a Salt Lake City bookstore, sitting quietly browsing a self-help book, her expression inscrutable but peaceful. She looked like she had walked through fire. The fan reported, not burned, but transformed. Rain pounded Flagstaff sidewalks as Kody drove, the SUV's wipers slicing at the storm as though attempting to erase time itself. Seated in silence, hands on the wheel, but his thoughts elsewhere, straddling denial and disbelief, he stared straight ahead as static crackled on the radio, as if even the airwaves were denying him closure. Once the dictatorial hub of the Brown family, now he was a shell man, his legacy crumbling at the hands of his own decisions. A.T. Robyn's house. Silence was suffocating. That evening, the kids avoided it, citing schoolwork and social events as excuses. But Robyn was smarter than that. It ran deeper than that. Aurora's testimony had ignited a spark, and now it was all falling apart. Second by torturous second, she wandered through the house like a ghost, unable to face her own image, afraid of the shame that would inevitably stare back. When Kody finally walked through the door, dripping wet and draped in the loss like a cloak, she stood up from the couch, but said nothing. He didn't either. He threw his keys onto the kitchen table, shed his damp coat, and made a beeline down the hall. The bang of the bedroom door testified where words neither could. Something that had lived between them was dead. Meanwhile, Christine sat with Aurora in a corner of the courthouse cafeteria, clutching her shaking hand. "You did something none of us could do," she whispered. "You made him own up to it." Aurora gave a tired smile, but a slight one. Her eyes glittered, not with terror, but defiance. "I did it not to hurt him," she said gently. "I just couldn't carry it anymore." That evening, Janelle phoned.
"I saw the whole thing," she said.
"You were brave. You were powerful. I'm sorry we weren't strong enough to end it when we had the chance." Christine was silent, but nodded, the silence pregnant with understanding. The long-sought connection between the sister wives was finally being forged, not out of love for Kody, but out of mutual suffering in spite of him. Meri, also, carried around feelings of guilt. Alone in her bed and breakfast in Paedon, Utah, she reviewed trial videos on her laptop. She heard Aurora's words ringing through her mind. "He made me invisible," Meri murmured back into the silence. "He did that to me, too." Meanwhile, TLC producers huddled to contain the firestorm. The ratings were through the roof, but what was the cost? In back rooms, arguments exploded. Should production be shut down completely? Or should they reshape the show based on the women's trajectories after Kody? One young producer, who spoke to Variety anonymously, captured the essence. "This was once a show about coming together, ugly as it was. Now it's about accountability." Kody stayed mostly out of public view. Paparazzi caught a single brief shot of him, alone at a coffee shop, writing furiously on a legal pad. The header on the page read, "My side of the story," whether it was a journal, a memoir, or an attempt one last time to take control. No one could say. Aurora, on the other hand, went back to school, hoping for something close to normal. But she was trailed by whispers down the corridors. Professors gazed with long, sympathetic eyes. Strangers stopped her, some to congratulate her, others to ask invasive questions. She remained silent. Until one day, she went to the student counseling center and spoke. "I need help with the fallout. It was that same week that Dayton broke his silence. In a tearful Instagram video, he confessed, "I didn't know what to do for my sister. I didn't even know what was going on. But now I do. And I stand with her." The post went viral. The comments section flashed with some encouraging, some brutal, but all with one truth. The Brown family would never be the same. And then came the unexpected statement from the fans, put out collectively by Christine, Janelle, and Meri. "We stand with Aurora." It said, "We are here for her to take back her voice. No child should ever feel invisible. We're healing too, in our own way. And we hope this is the start of something raw, honest, and better." Although the family broke in public eyes, something profoundly quiet started to emerge, not unity by Kody's decree, but solidarity forged by shared scars and the determination to rise again. The aftermath was not explosive. It crept in on its arrival, missed calls that never came back, birthday cards that went unopened, group chats that no longer vibrated with emojis and secret jokes. TLC was quiet, only releasing a cryptic statement. Production is on hold indefinitely for internal review. Fans, however, knew what that actually meant. The show, as they were familiar with, was finished. The Browns had ceased to be a reality show. What was left was a living warning story, playing out before our very eyes. Aurora went back to Arizona, but not to the home she used to know. She visited a friend close to Flagstaff University, where she'd enrolled in classes incognito under an assumed name. She kept a low profile, wore shades even inside, and deleted all her social media, except for a single posting. "Healing isn't linear, but I'm not going back." It racked up 90,000 likes in under 24 hours. Inside Robyn's once bustling home, the atmosphere was unrecognizable. Dayton sat by himself, headphones on, lost in his sketchbook, drawing futuristic cities, places where betrayal didn't come disguised as love. Brianna barely spoke. Ariella began stuttering again. And Robyn, she drifted around the house like a ghost, her voice in hushed tones, her presence light as air. She stood in the window late at night most evenings, waiting. Wishing the phone would ring. Wishing Kody would come back, but the SUV never arrived. Kody, too, had disappeared. Paparazzi got one fleeting shot at a dirty gas station on the outskirts of town, ball cap drawn low, beard extended. When questioned on the verdict, he growled, "I wasn't perfect," then took off, without even filling up. Rumor was that he'd rented a small apartment on Sedona's outskirts, just blocks from the cul-de-sac where he'd spent so much time envisioning the Brown family's forever kingdom. Meanwhile, Christine's unobtrusive presence had become a rallying point for many. Fans started referring to her as the anchor of the fallout. She created a podcast that she called After the Escape, a series about healing, emotional scars, and wounds between generations. The very first episode was titled Invisible Daughters, and it featured Aurora herself, with the surname changed, but her voice-processed digital tones were unmistakable and rang clear. Janelle reappeared too, though she didn't address the case directly. Instead, she posted a photo of her bookshelf. Titles included Toxic Parents, Daring Greatly, and The Body Keeps the Score. Her caption read, "We're all learning, even the ones who left late." Even Meri, long silent, made a subtle move. She posted an Instagram story, a single candle flickering in a dark room. Overlay text read, "Some stories we bury. Some stories bury us. Others we finally tell." Comments erupted. Was this regarding Aurora, an attack on Kody? Meri remained silent. But she didn't remove the post. With the public furor subsiding, emotional waves rippled even wider. A teen abuse charity had its donations triple, many branded in honor of AAB. Mental health message boards glowed with threads that read, "When your father chose silence," and the pain of being ignored. The show had expanded beyond the Browns. It had created a movement, but not with everyone did I end private, TLC panicked. Contracts were reworked. Spin-off ideas flew. Life after plural, healing wives, broken roots. None stuck, because the viewers weren't clamoring for more melodrama. They were craving something authentic, something real. Kody turned down every offer, not out of lack of need for cash, he did, but because no crew of cameras could stage the redemption he so badly needed. And then, unexpectedly, something happened. Christine went to Robyn's house, and oh filming, and oh fanfare. Just two women sitting face to face, bound by something stronger than marriage. Robyn spoke first. "I didn't cover for her." Christine nodded. "Neither did I, but we can still demonstrate to her that we're listening now." And at that moment, Robyn
cried.
Not for herself, but for the daughter she'd failed to hear. Months went by, but the reverberation of that courtroom never completely disappeared. Aurora returned to school, keeping her head down. She opted for secrecy over fame, though her name quietly became a symbol for every daughter who'd ever felt overlooked. Robyn stayed away from the public eye. Her carefully curated Instagram evaporated. All that was left was a deactivated profile with one quote: "Some storms destroy homes. Others just reveal the cracks." Kody never came back to television. TLC just pulled the plug on Sister Wives. No goodbye episode. No last tell-all. Just nothing. But that nothing? It screamed louder than words ever could, and amidst the destruction, something new arose. A soft truth, point one, that didn't have to shout to be heard. This family's tale isn't over. Not by a long way. So hit that like button if you're #TeamWives. Subscribe now for the next scandalous update. And don't forget to leave your opinions in the comments. Who do you think will come back from the ashes? Stay shady. Stay curious. And I'll see you in the next scandal. Mark from Reality Recap.